Hello and welcome to Kirtan London Journey to Joy, episode number 14, with your hosts for today, myself, Madhva.
Hello and welcome.
And I'm joined by a very, very special guest again, who's very kindly continued to come back to us to help finish chapter 7, who is Martin Hausner, aka his spiritual name is Mahatma. And he's been going through chapter 7 with us so far. We've got quite far into the chapter. We're towards the last section of it now, and we've been talking about all the key points throughout chapter 7 of the Gita. And the idea is today we'll be wrapping up chapter 7 with the final chunk of knowledge that's being shared. But as always, before we start, we like to begin with an invocation prayer. If you don't know what an invocation is, it's a prayer to our teachers. And we're asking for their blessings and we're showing them our gratitude. So if you know the prayers, please chant them with me. And then we'll start the discussion on the Gita straight after that. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Shatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hello Mahatma, nice to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Nice to be here.
We finished off the last episode. We were talking about this subject, which is quite an important subject in the realm of spirituality. If you're a spiritual seeker, the difference between the personal and the impersonal aspects of the divine. I believe that was where, somewhere around there is where we left off the last episode.
Actually, I want to start with text 24.
Okay, so that's still on this subject.
Still on the subject because the I can't remember if we talk. I don't remember talking about that verse, and the subsequent verses, about 2 or 3 more, relate to that verse. So it'll make more sense if we start there.
Amazing. Just want to say hello to Lisa, by the way, for joining us in the Zoom room. Nice to have you.
Okay. So as Madhava was saying, we had a lot of discussion in the last class about what is known as, in philosophical terms, personalism and impersonalism. God being either energy, God being everything, God being everywhere, or God being a person, which is sometimes difficult to conceive because sounds like a person would have limitations. So if he's impersonal, he could be everywhere without limitation. And of course, we're not talking about a person like ourselves that would be limited. Anyway, this debate, personal conception of the divine, the ultimate truth, impersonal conception, this debate has been going on for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years in Indian philosophical systems. And I think we had presented in the last class more around the idea of relationship, that people have relationships, you don't have intimate relationships with energy or something which you can't put your finger on per se.
Right.
You can have some kind of relationship, but not something where you're interacting and reciprocating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in some forms of meditation, you'll meditate on your breath, or you'll meditate on a candle, or you'll meditate on a spot on the wall to calm your mind, right? So the meditation is focused on calming the mind. That's why if you focus on your eyes on one thing, it calms your mind. If you move your eyes, your mind goes with it. So to meditate, you close your eyes, or you stare at the tip of your nose, or you meditate on a candle or a spot. But the candle, you don't have a relationship with the candle, at least not the candle. You might have a relationship, but the candle is not going to reciprocate. Candle will give you light and so forth, but the candle is not going to exchange like two humans can exchange, obviously. The spot on the wall, or even your own breath, is not going to exchange like two human beings. So the personal concept of meditation is that you're meditating on a divine being who can reciprocate with your love, with your affection. So it's a whole different thing. And when you go deeply into studying the Vedas, you see that it's not just about that desire is deeply ingrained in our heart, but that's the desire of the divine. That's what he wants. And the impersonal aspect is there, and you can connect with it if that's what you want, but that's not what he wants. He doesn't want you to connect with that. It's like, you're coming to see me, and I say, well, you can see my secretary, spend a day with my secretary. No, I've come to see you. But if you want to spend the whole day with my secretary, that's what you want, then I'll let you do that. If you want to spend the day with me and I say, no, that's not going to work. And if I want to see you, I don't want you to spend time with my secretary. I want to see you personally. So that's his position.
Yeah.
So you remember what else we discussed? You can encapsulate a few points.
I was trying to find I can't remember what we discussed, but I just wanted to add something to this point because I think it's an important one and I like it. And it's something that, like you said, is something that is generally, well, it's been discussed or debated for thousands of years. And I often find it misunderstood. And one thing to me that makes a lot of sense, if you look at it from a logical perspective, something that always made sense to me, this personal versus impersonal thing, is that generally, if you come at it from the impersonal perspective, you're saying that there is no personal God. And I really liked the argument that Prabhupada, the author of the book, I believe this was his argument, which is that, well, then you're limiting God. If you believe in God, if you believe in that higher power, it's limiting it because you're saying that can't be, that doesn't exist. It's only this. Whereas the personal view acknowledges actually Krishna, we call God Krishna, is everything. And there is an impersonal aspect. And guess what? You can go there. You can achieve that if you want it. We just don't want it. There's something better than that. And that's the personal aspect. And so just from a logical point of view, that always resonated with me. I felt like that made sense.
Yeah. What's more important, the light or the light bulb? Well,
right.
You
and
don't
it's
have
more
light
beautiful.
without a light bulb. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. There we go. That's the logic.
So this verse, Krishna himself is explaining this verse 24. I'll read it. Unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. So, in other words, we talked about this idea that what a lot of people say is that Krishna is an avatar. Krishna is a temporary manifestation of the higher light, which technically in Sanskrit is called Brahman. Brahman is the supreme truth, the ultimate. Krishna is a temporary manifestation of that. He comes to the earth to teach people to go back into that light. And we are all Krishna. We are all Krishna is God in this form, but it's temporary. We're all God, and we're all meant to go back to that light. So this verse, Krishna is dealing with that idea. And Krishna is saying, men who don't understand me think that I'm a temporary manifestation from that light, from that impersonal energy. He said, but actually it's the other way around, that I always exist in a personal form and the energy comes from me. And so he says that if you think it's the other way around, you just don't know. You're lacking information. I don't always think it's lacking information. I think it's some people just don't want to deal with a personal God. Sometimes it's hard to deal with people and, deal with God. He's like demanding, better make him impersonal. He won't ask me, and he can't ask me anything now. So there's
makes sense
that.
What you're saying.
Yeah, that idea is there also, right? And, it's like you're growing. It's like you're growing up, and your mother's making demands. If you could just turn your mother into a programmable energy, and you could program what you want her to say, would be easier. Or she doesn't have any control over you. So anyway, this verse is important because Krishna is directly saying, I didn't come from some impersonal source as a representative of that to take you back to that, but I am the source of that. It exists. I created it. It's coming from me. So the next verse is interesting. I can't remember. I can't remember everything we discussed, but I don't think it's a bad idea to discuss something over again if that happens. So I'll read the next verse and explain it. It's quite interesting. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. For them, I am covered by my internal potency, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and inexhaustible. So some of you may have heard the word Maya. Maya means energy, but Maya also means illusion. And so to understand some spiritual truth, you don't just need knowledge, but you need purity of consciousness. It's not like material knowledge. You're smart and you can understand. Spiritual knowledge is not like that. It's just your IQ can help you, but you also require a certain level of purity. You could say a certain lifestyle that enables your consciousness to be able to perceive what ordinary people cannot perceive. So Krishna is saying that you could see him and think he's an ordinary person. You wouldn't understand who he is. Because he has, how should we say it? He kind of hides himself from people who aren't interested in him, kind of like a Hollywood actor, doesn't want to be seen, right? Puts on his sunglasses, puts on a hat, He's got a blockbuster movie. He won't be able to walk to the store, take him 3 hours, get stopped every step of the way. So it's like Krishna is saying, I don't want to be known by people who don't want to know me. I don't want a relationship if you don't want it. And so this is a very interesting verse because he's saying that I have a nature that I don't reveal to those who don't want to know it. I have a nature that I don't reveal for those who are not yet refined enough to have the vision, spiritual consciousness to see who I am, what I am. And, let's take atheism, for example. Atheists have many arguments, many of which seem scientific and logical, to at least seem that way to certain people. And that's what they want. That's how they see the world. That's their reality. And so what Krishna is saying in this verse is if that's your reality, then that's what you will see, and That's all you will see. And you won't be able to see beyond matter to something spiritual. And then you'll believe, it's kind of a trick. You'll believe there is nothing spiritual because you won't be able to see it, because you don't believe in it. You don't do the meditation and service to purify yourself to be able to see the spiritual reality. So you just deny it. Like atheistic people will say there's no soul, everything comes from matter. But a spiritual person will say, I don't know what you're talking about, because I can see the consciousness, I can see the soul within every form of life. They actually have that vision to see it. So it's quite interesting, isn't it? Like you can see something, but this person can't because of, your lifestyle, your consciousness, and we're looking at the same thing. And Krishna is explaining why you can't see it, because you don't really want to. So I'll pull the blinds down. And although you're looking, there's a curtain in front of you.
I think on some level, everyone can relate to this. On some level, where you may have an experience where you're seeing something clear as day. Clear as day. This is so obvious. But someone next to you doesn't. They see it completely different. They just don't see it.
Right.
And that can progress on different levels. And that can go so far as, like you said, spiritual vision versus material vision. So it makes sense.
I mean, have you ever, it's really interesting to watch a debate between an atheist and a theist, because they both have such a different way of looking at the same thing.
It almost feels impossible. It's just headbutting.
But that's how they're seeing it. Yeah. That's why.
It's just internal differences.
Yeah. They're actually seeing it. So Krishna is saying, if you don't want to see me, that's fine. You won't. You don't want to see me. I don't want to see you either. Like, why should I allow you to understand who I am and what I am if you don't even want to? And in another verse, Krishna says something interesting, which is, I'll help you not see me, and I'll give you all the philosophy you need to not believe in me, if that's what you want. So he's actually helping us not see him. There's some atheistic arguments that are like they're subtle, they're incredibly intelligent, and so forth, although I don't subscribe to them, but within their own context, they're quite intelligent. But we know that it's Krishna residing in their heart who supplied the intelligence that they wanted in order to convince themselves that there is no God. So the God they don't believe in gave them the intelligence to come up with the argument not to believe in him. It's quite funny. God has quite a sense of humor.
Just to unwrap that a little bit, because in one sense, it sounds almost harsh that, okay, you don't want to know me? Fine, I'll make sure you don't know me. But if you look at it from another perspective, it makes sense. And the way you just said it at the end there is what gave me that context, which is that this is how I heard it, that ultimately everything comes from God, right? If you're a theist, you see it that way, that everything comes from God. So the potency to have any level of intelligence is coming from God. And that is based on what we want, which is why it makes sense that if we don't want to know God, he'll give us the intelligence not to know him.
Yeah, it would be a botheration if you actually had, if you're an atheist and you had some spiritual revelation that could put you in a lot of anxiety because it would turn your world upside down. You'd rather not have it. Yeah. You'd rather just have, atheistic epiphanies, reconfirmations of your belief that there is nothing but matter. So Krishna is just saying, well, if that's what you want, I'll help you and I'll give you the vision so that you will be convinced of that. And I'll hide from you because, me in your life would really disturb you. So right. I'll just kind of leave it.
Let you do your thing.
And just as the atheist is having his epiphanies that there's no God, the spiritualists are having epiphanies, but they're experiencing a relationship. They're experiencing something which is it's a different world. of experience. It's not a material experience. And that's hard to argue with, which is why I find, discussing with an atheist, it's kind of like trying to explain to someone that a certain fruit is delicious, but they've never had the fruit and they don't believe you. Or they don't even believe the fruit exists. And you eat it every day. And it's like, what can you say?
Yeah.
So, we have our spiritual experience. So, well, the reverse thing is when you have a spiritual practice, then there's no illusion covering you. It's removed. So you can see God in every heart. You can see the soul in every being. You see things differently. And it's not theoretical knowledge. It's not book knowledge. You actually have that revelation because that energy which is covering a materialistic person's eyes who doesn't want to connect with anything spiritual, that's removed. And then it's like, oh, somebody cleaned my glasses. Or it's more like someone gave me the right prescription. I've been using the wrong prescription and I didn't realize it. I thought the world was blurry. I didn't know any other way of seeing. Something like that.
You said that we're having our spiritual experiences, and I can definitely relate to that. And I know that is true for many people. I'm curious if you would be open to sharing some of your experiences that have made this so real to you, that have made this so relevant and true.
You got about 3 days for me to share?
Well, maybe 1 or 2, because it would.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, just if I just look at my life,
yeah,
of how it transformed from before I began my spiritual practice, and how I've grown as a person, and the level of self-control and discipline I've achieved through my spiritual practices. I mean, I don't know how to say this because it sounds like I'm bragging. I'm not bragging. I'm just describing how the process works, and it would work this way for anyone who follows it. But I've been able to achieve internal levels of discipline and self-control that are rare to find in this world. And like I said, I'm not bragging. I'm saying it's just when you come to a spiritual level, you just go above that. You go above the level of consciousness where you need things that ordinary people need. So controlling is not so difficult because now you're experiencing something better. You're filled on a spiritual platform. And when you're filled on a spiritual platform, it's not difficult to give up things that you used to do that really didn't bring you the ultimate pleasure. It's kind of a natural byproduct. So, but I would say if I had to put it like in, just not being philosophical at all, I would say that probably the greatest experiences, I see my consciousness is kind of like this all the time. And what's going on down here or around here, it doesn't really affect it. It's kind of like when you fall in love, when a boy or girl fall in love, they're basically intoxicated being with one another. So what's going on around them, sometimes they're oblivious to. It doesn't really matter. As long as they're together, they're happy, isn't it? It could be raining. Right. They're walking in the rain. It's cold. They don't really care as long as they're together.
Yeah, they'll turn it into a good time.
So, that's kind of my spiritual experience. Like when I'm doing my spiritual practice, then I'm so full that it's just like what's going on in the world, what's going on around me. It's not that significant because I'm situated, maybe because I'm above the clouds. So what's going on below the clouds, where I am, it's always sunny, because I've elevated my consciousness above the clouds. So it could be snowing down there, raining, whatever. I don't really experience it. It doesn't really affect me.
Wow.
That's what I would say is probably the most, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. So, dear listeners, if you want a taste of that, then you know what to do. Well, actually, what we're doing right now is really a vital part of that. It's trying to take these deep spiritual messages that have been given to us and absorb them, study them, learn them, implement them. I know that Mahatma has been doing that for all of his life, and this is the result that we clearly see. It's amazing.
Well, there's a verse coming up after the next one that we can use as a sequel to this question or to my answer.
Okay.
Because it explains it. It explains it well. So, verse 26. I'm going to read all the remaining verses because we have time. Previously, we weren't reading them all. Verse 26 is interesting because Krishna is now comparing himself to ourselves and the difference. So it's like, okay, you want to understand the difference between you and God or the divine. So he explains it here. O Arjuna, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I know everything that has happened in the past, all that is happening in the present, and all things that are yet to come. I also know all living entities, but me no one knows. So he's continuing with this idea that people who don't have the desire or the level of purity or spiritual development, they don't understand him. But he, as the Supreme, he's in everyone's heart. He understands everybody. And he knows past, present, and future, because that's by definition. If you're going to be God and you don't know past, present, and future, you'll be fired. If you're applying for the position of God, you have to know past, present, and future, and you have to know everybody else. Or if you claim to be God, then, let's see your resume. What's on your resume? I'm God. Okay. Do you know past, present, future? Do you know everyone? Because if you're God, that's going to be on your resume. So, you could look at it that way. And so, we're saying, well, if I become spiritually elevated, I'll become God. And Krishna is saying, no, you won't. You can be God-like, but this is what it means to be God. If you knew everything in the future, you could do good in the stock market, don't you think? So nobody knows everything in the future. I mean, you can make predictions, but nobody knows exactly, but he does, because he's not like us. And if you ever wanted to get history straight, just ask Krishna, because he knows everything, we weren't there. We have to read the history books, but he knows. He's in everyone's heart. He knows exactly. So he's, going, just making that point in a different way, that, knowing him is not, everyone doesn't know him. Okay, so this is when you asked me if I wanted to finish these verses in the last class. When I came across this current verse I'm going to read, I said I could spend the whole class on this verse. So we'll see. I'll try to control myself and not spend the whole class just on this verse, but this is a very, very important verse for us. I'll read in Sanskrit to give you all a feel, and nice. You just feel it. Just listen to it. Sanskrit is the language. The sound vibration it works on a subtle level and on a spiritual level. So you just hear it. That's all you have to do. Icha dvesha samuttena dvandamohena bharata sarva bhutani sangmohang sagariyanti parandapa. O Scion of Bharata, that's another name for Arjuna. O conqueror of the foe. He's encouraging him to fight, and you can win this battle, O conqueror of the foe. All living entities are born into delusion, bewildered by dualities arisen from desire and hate. So I just want to pull this apart. Some key words we can focus on. I want to go into the word for word. So you have duality here, you have desire and hate here, you have delusion,
Yeah.
you have bewildered. Those, so like what is being said here? And quite interesting. Krishna is saying this is the condition we're born into. Like when you take birth in this world, these conditions are thrust upon you. And let's start with desire and hate. Desire and hatred are categories, are major, major categories. Like if we were on what's the word I'm looking for? Umbrella categories, like a folder on a computer. And there are many files in the folder. So desire is the umbrella category, like desiring what? Well, there's fame, there's wealth, there's success, there's desiring to learn skills, desiring to have someone, desiring to have things. So when Krishna says desire, it's basically when I say I want, that's what he's talking about. Whenever you say I want, whatever it is. And sometimes even that desire that Krishna's talking about that we're bewildered by can even enter the spiritual realm where a lot of I want, it enters the spiritual realm, but it has a materialistic side to it because it's self-centered. I want to be peaceful. Is being peaceful good? Yeah, it's good. Is being peaceful spiritual? Yeah. But when the ego enters into it, I want to be peaceful, so I will be happy. Then the happiness is just self-centered me. I want to be happy. It's not much different than someone saying, I want to be happy by achieving something. So it still falls in that category of desire. And then the next category, which is just the opposite of desire, is hate. Hate also refers to being repulsed. It refers to resentment, refers to envy and jealousy and anger and anything that repulses me. So you can also translate desire and hate as attraction and repulsion. Now, if you analyze your mind and you think about this and take this with you and see if this isn't true in your life. When we are living our life, generally we are being pushed by what we're attracted by, or attracted to, or repulsed by. So if you're repulsed by something, you move away from it. If you're attracted, you move close to it, right? Say, oh, look at that in the shop window. And you start to walk towards the shop window, you're attracted. Then you see there's some dog excrement on the ground and it smells bad and you move back. Ooh. And so it's so, as you look at your life, you see attraction, repulsion. It's actually pushing us around. And so, I want to be free. You want to be free, you'll have to become free from this. Because if you're not free from this, just achieving something in this world is not going to make you free. Okay, maybe you've made enough money to retire, so you're free from working, but you're not free from desire and hatred. Maybe you become famous, you're still not. So this is the fundamental way in which we are being pushed around. Even in the name of freedom, we think we're free to do what we want and go what we want. But if you stand back from it and look at it more clearly, even what we say is what I want is very much conditioned. It's not always exactly what we want, but it's being what we're pushed to do. Because sometimes we do something in the name of I want, and it would be better we don't do it, right? We're wasting time, or it's not good for us. And we can't stop sometimes, or always we can't stop.
Yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to rain on your parade, but we're not actually free until we become free from material desire. And the other, not the other, another nice point where Krishna is saying, he's saying hatred or repulsion, it's the opposite side of attraction or desire. It's just that it's just a duality. So I'm attracted to this, I run after it. Well, that feels good. I'm repulsed by this, I move away from it. Doesn't feel so good, I'm trying to get away from it, but it's the same basic consciousness, moving away from unpleasant, moving towards the unpleasant. And have you ever been in a situation where you've been extremely upset by something and you've become very angry or moved away from it? Of course, we all have. Or extremely attracted to something and you didn't want to be attracted to it. It wasn't really what you wanted, but you're just by nature attracted to it. So we're often in a very helpless position. And so, the ultimate freedom is freedom from this duality, which you come to on this spiritual platform. And I don't know, he's kind of taking the conversation to you're a living entity, you're different from me, and this is what you're dealing with, and I don't deal with this. I'm not part of this world. And, the word delusion is interesting because if you're in a delusion, how do you know? That's what it means to be in a delusion, that you wouldn't know. If you knew, you wouldn't be deluded.
Just to reflect a little bit, I feel like you've said more than, I think what you've explained is a little bit more wholesome than what I'm hearing. But in essence, just coming particularly to the desire and hate, the way I was hearing it is selfishness. So, and it's funny because I did peek at the next verse as well, and Krishna goes on to talk about service. And so I thought there does seem to be that distinction. So desire and hate essentially is I'm in it for me. It's all about me. And then those categories are how that me mentality works. The desire or attraction and the hate or repulsion is how I tend to think. And that those things are controlling my actions rather than me controlling those things.
And everybody can think of examples in their life of what they're being controlled by.
Yeah, when you were saying something earlier, I was just thinking, I'm sure I could definitely relate to that when you were saying how there's things that you don't even want to be attracted to, but you're attracted to them.
Yeah. Isn't that painful? Isn't that painful?
I'm thinking about things where you can ruin your life over things like this. This is where affairs or for men, something is, sorry, I'm going to go real deep here real quick. Pornography. Men don't want to do that stuff, but they do. Or you don't want to eat that. This is less intense. But an overweight person, I consider I need to lose a few pounds. I see something, I think I shouldn't eat it, but I can't help it. I want to eat it. I just do it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm constantly being forced.
Yeah. I think one of the beautiful thoughts from this verse is, at least this is the way I always thought, was even if I'm attracted to something and it's giving me some pleasure, but oftentimes it's like that pleasure is old. We've done it and we don't really need to do it anymore, or we don't want to do it, or it may not be healthy. And like you say, we can't give it up. For me, often just the thought of giving it up is so inspiring. Like, what if I could transcend that? What if that were no longer a part of what I have to battle with as a conditioned soul in this world? Wouldn't that be good? So we can do a little exercise now and think of something that, I don't want to use the word addiction because it could be misunderstood, but basically we are addicted to many things in this world. Maybe you're addicted to chocolate, like it's really hard. It's not like you're going to go through withdrawal, but you might go through mental withdrawal if you don't get it. You might be dangerous to be around if you don't get your chocolate today, right? But think of something that you really don't need, and your life would be better without. And you're finding it difficult to give up. And now imagine right now, it's gone. You don't need this anymore. And then I'll just ask you, how do you feel right now? Like that is no longer an issue. You'll never have to battle with that again, whether it's anger or sexual desire or greed, the need to exploit other, take advantage, like any of those things. And as soon as you do that, obviously you feel like, wow, that would be so good.
Yeah, I'd feel
my life would be so much better if that weren't in my life, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, and what to speak if you took 10 things like that, your life would be amazing. How free would you be? You don't have to do all these things, right?
Right.
When the latest this and that comes out, you're like, I don't need that. I'm fine. You see something you're normally attracted to. No, I don't need it. What freedom would that be?
Yeah.
So, it's one of the ultimate paradoxes that self-discipline, self-control is the highest freedom.
Right.
It seems like, we're so restricted. You guys are so strict. Krishna wants you to control yourself. No, he's actually giving you a ticket to freedom from your own self, from your own desire.
This is such an interesting point.
Go ahead.
It's so interesting. Sorry, I thought I didn't mean to cut in, but it's so interesting because it doesn't make any sense unless you've experienced it. That's my experience of it. You think, well, why am I doing all of these things? Why do I have to be so self-controlled and practice austerity? But when you ponder this topic deeply and have some experience of the topic the way you've just described it, it becomes apparent that it's true, that to some degree, done properly, because I think you can do it improperly as well, but done properly, austerity or self-control and self-discipline, possibly better, easier terminology to understand, is the ticket to our internal and external freedom.
Yeah, totally. Of course. Society doesn't tell us that, but we have to see through the propaganda.
We're told the opposite.
Yeah, but we know it's not true. The reason we think it's true is because we see other people who have more than us, and we make assumptions about their life being better than ours.
Right.
But if you get to know them, you see their life isn't better. And you really begin to understand the person whose life is better is the person who has a higher level of spiritual consciousness, who has more control, but also more passion, compassion, more integrity, more kindness, and so forth. That's the person who has the best life. And there's a huge problem in the world today, is that education has now degraded itself into just basically primarily training for some occupation. The humanities are like kind of finished. And, but that's what education used to be, like go to school and read 100 books. Would that give you a broader perspective on life? Of course. Read books on philosophy. Would that help you think better? Of course. Read books on psychology. Will that help you understand yourself, other people, relationships? Of course. And now it's like, no, you got to do science and math and then go and,
turn people into machines, money, tools.
So that's a lot of what we're up against. Education.
Interesting.
Philosophy is meant to help you think. That's why the students were required to take philosophy. To just get your mind to be more analytical, even if it's just about practical things. If you're trained in philosophy, you can use it to understand, to get clarity on practical things. Get clarity on, like, you have democracy. but you have people who don't know how to think, and people just vote for politicians because it feels good.
Yeah.
So that's part of the problem we face. So we're being raised in a very deprived environment. We're not given any spiritual education in school. We have to get it ourselves. A lot of our religious training isn't really answering questions. And everyone around us is saying, hey, I'm making a lot of money. I'm happy. Look at my picture on Facebook, my big smile. And you go to their house, they're crying. And that was their, it's like, what's the joke? I wish I was as happy as I was on Facebook, something like that.
Our Facebook.
So, and that's why sometimes statements like this may be hard for people. Like, this is like, self-discipline. But so Krishna's trying to just be very blunt about it. He said, look at your life and see how many things you're being pushed around by, right? You're just walking down the street, minding your own business, and then sale on this. And you don't need this, but you go buy it because it was on sale. And you realize that advertising really worked. The music in the store really worked. The salesperson was really good. The price was just right. And then you come home and I was like, why did I buy this? What happened? Pushed around, right? You get angry at some dear friend. What happened? You got pushed by your anger. What a life, right?
Mm.
So, when I was saying that I'm above the clouds now, I would say most of the time, 95%, I think. And the other 5%, I don't really break down much. I keep it under control. Maybe inside I'm a little affected, but externally I keep it under control, because to me, to give in to those passions is its ultimate defeat, its ultimate misery. Like, let's say you do something that's upsetting to me, and so I can feel this resentment developing within me. But my initial reaction is, if I give into this, I'm degrading myself. I'm harming our relationship. And I'm just going to make myself miserable, even though I feel resentment, but I don't give into it. Because if I do, it's pushing me around. It's going to push around what I say. It's going to push around my behavior. And I'm not really controlling it. And to live a life in which you make rational decisions about how you want to behave and how you want to react and actually do that, that's an amazing life, as opposed to just being at the whims of desire and hatred. That's like, that's not really what humans are meant to be. The world would be better if we weren't pushed around that way.
One way I understood, because you also highlighted a few other words, one way I understood the word bewildered. Another way I looked at that was, to some degree, it indicates suffering, that our inability to control our desire and hatred, or our selfish mentality, results in our own suffering, bewilderment. We're lost. We feel unable to find what it is that we're looking for.
Yeah. Or even to look beyond for something more.
Right.
That also can happen. I think this verse is very important. And I think it's important for all of us to really, just visualize a life where we weren't pushed around so much, where we could make decisions about how we wanted to be and act that way. Like, I don't want to be an angry person. I don't want to be resentful, and have the strength to be able to control that. And that's what you get from spiritual life. You get that kind of strength. And that, you were asking me about my experience. Well, that's part of the experience. It's this experience of freedom from having to be pushed around by sight, smell, taste, touch, that I don't want to be, that I haven't chosen to be.
Right.
That are just, it's just, oh, that looks good, let's eat it.
That's the one I'm thinking of when you say, how would you feel if you got rid of that? Can't control my tongue.
Well, also, how you would feel. You would feel strong. You would feel like
Would feel amazing.
you would have
Healthier.
more you would value yourself more. So I have done something powerful. I appreciate myself for doing that.
Absolutely. I would.
All right. So that's what I wanted to say on that verse.
Thank you.
We have a few more. So now in this next verse, I'll read the next verse and explain it. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, and whose sinful actions are completely eradicated, that means free from karma, are freed from the dualities of delusion, and they engage themselves in service with determination. So, persons who acted piously, that means if you've been on a spiritual path in your past life or been religious to some degree, in this life, if you've given up sin means actions with bad results, karmic actions. Sin's kind of a awkward word to use. It's a very Christian word. But it just means to say things which go against nature.
Right.
Things which are harmful for you, harmful for others.
Right.
Violence, lying, cheating, stealing, and so forth.
That's a nicer way to put it, I think, in modern vocabulary, with all the stigmas.
You have, the yamas and niyamas in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, don't covet, don't steal, don't exploit the opposite sex, etc. Those kinds of things.
Right.
So it said, if you act properly on a spiritual level, it will eradicate the illusion. And then the last thing that's being said is if you begin a spiritual path, it's going to steady your life. Engage in service with determination. You'll be steady in what you do. In your service means divine service ultimately, but that's the theme of Bhagavad-gita is service. And Krishna says, my service, spiritual service with determination, nothing is going to bewilder you or delude you or railroad you. But if your lifestyle is drinking, smoking, exploitation, etc., that this verse doesn't apply to you. You'll get the opposite result.
Right.
You won't be freed from the duality of delusion.
Yeah, the dualities of delusion. That's we see that those terms are there again.
Yeah.
And again, what I feel is I'm picking up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm feeling that vibe that this is the previous verse is telling us, you do it like this, you're going to be miserable. Whereas if you do it like this is the key to happiness. This is what will free you from the dualities of delusion, which again, to me, has a very much suffering vibe to it. And then these people, what they do is they engage in my devotional service. So they dedicate their life to a life of service to the divine. This is the key to your happiness.
Service is everything. You cannot be happy without service unless you're really drunk. Okay, then I grant it, you'll be happy out of ignorance. You can fall into ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. But aside from that, I know a lot of people in England find their happiness. England's a tough place to be happy sometimes. So, beer
We've got a strong drinking culture here, that's for sure.
It seems to work, but it's not a good way to find your happiness.
We have a terrible reputation abroad as being the nation that gets the drunkest and causes the most problems on the streets of other neighboring hot countries.
Well, from my experience of being in England and Scotland and Ireland, yeah, we don't drink that much in America. Maybe at football games, but not for breakfast or anything. It's not a breakfast beverage, and nobody drinks during the day and goes back to work. That's just not allowed.
Right.
So when I saw that in England, I was like really surprised. I'd never seen that in America.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't drink.
So,
I haven't for a long time, so I'm not a part of the culture so much. So I also am not fully aware of how deep it goes.
yeah, it's definitely part of the culture.
Yeah.
But service, it's our nature to serve. And what you can experience through service, you can't experience through anything else. And a lot of times when we're not giving, we get self-absorbed and we start becoming depressed about our own problems. But when we start serving and helping people with their problems, we forget about our problems. So, we think I'll be happy if I remember what I want, but actually you're happy when you forget what you want. Not that you give up your needs entirely, but when you're absorbed in helping others, you're not so concerned about what you have or don't have. That doesn't become your barometer or standard for happiness. Our culture it's because of all the marketing that's gone so deeply into our psyche that even if we know what we're saying, like you listen to this class and you go, yeah, this makes sense. I know what you're saying is true. And then you go out the next day and boom, that, the social pressure, the marketing, the conditioning, it all kicks in again. So it requires some commitment, and the deeper your understanding of this, the easier it is to let go of it. I personally, when I began my spiritual life, I really had a strong feeling of failure in the sense that I was being controlled by things that I didn't even want to do. And I just felt like if there's anything that I could call a failure, that's it. You're doing something, you don't even want to do it, and you can't stop yourself. And it was like, what kind of life is that? And many, many people are living that life. They don't even realize they're living it. But I realized it. I was fairly young when I realized it. And so I was like happy and unhappy at the same time. Like externally happy because everything was good, but I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. That doesn't really work. I mean, it's okay, but it's not really what I want. And I know it, and I still do it. That wasn't good. So it's, to be spiritually evolved, you have to have this kind of what I call like razor sharp vision. You have to be able to cut through the forest, because the forest is pretty dense.
Right.
And the social pressure and marketing and culture is pretty dense, and it's very easy to be controlled by it, manipulated by it.
Absolutely.
So if you're able to see things more clearly, then you have a chance. Otherwise, the duality of this world is going to pull us. One of the most interesting verses of the Gita is where Krishna says, don't be affected by happiness. And so people would say, why wouldn't you want to be affected by happiness? What does it mean to not be affected by happiness? Like, I've never heard anybody say that. No, and Krishna says, he also says, tolerate happiness. Like, what does that mean? Why would you need to tolerate happiness? And so when you look into it more deeply, happiness is just the other side of the coin of distress. And if you go crazy when you're happy, you're going to go crazy when you're distressed. Whereas if something good happens and you can take it like this, you say, well, something's good, I should be up here. No, take it like this. So when something bad happens, you'll still be here. But if you're going up, what goes up must go down. You'll go down. You'll be a yo-yo. Oh, this was so good. We had such a good time. Oh, work was so bad. I hate it. Oh, we had such a great vacation. Work, I hate it. Oh, Friday night was so good. We got so drunk. It was so great, the party, blah, blah, blah. And then Saturday morning, oh, I was so sick when I woke up. Yeah. Your life is going to be like a yo-yo.
Mm.
That's what duality is all about. It's just being a yo-yo, you know. Things are good, you're up. Things are bad, you're down. And your whole life is up and down, and you're not in control of it. That's not intelligent. You know, like there's a lot of stories like that in the Vedas, where something good happens and people say, that was really good. And the person who knows this philosophy says, we'll see. Because sometimes something good happens and it turns out to be bad, you know, and then something bad happens and people will say, oh, that was really bad. And the wise person will say, we'll see. So there's so many stories like that where the good turned out to be bad and the bad turned out to be good. And the person was detached from either one.
Just on that, so does that mean that we want to become emotionless, or how does that work? Detachment without becoming, because I sense that this can be misunderstood. At least I've experienced it, that you become just falsely detached.
Yeah. You actually can't be detached. You just have to be detached from the things that aren't good for you and be attached. If you're attached to the right thing, that's a kind of detachment, in the sense that you've detached yourself from the bad things. You've attached yourself to the right things, and those right things are helping you. So there are things you should be attached to because they're spiritual in nature and they help you. But you can't be attached to those spiritual things if you're still attached to material things, because they pull away from you. So we don't say be detached from everything. We say be detached from the things that are harmful.
Right.
What's the point? Be detached from the things that are harmful, and you know they're harmful, and you can't, and you're having a hard time letting them go. And it's through your spiritual strength, through your meditation, your sadhana, your spiritual practice, your study of bhagavad-gita, etc., through Kirtan, that you start to fill up your tank of bliss within your heart. And then you don't need these other things. It's part of why we can't give up what we know we don't need. Got no replacement. You know, it's like this apartment, this flat is horrible. Once you get out, well, I have no place to go. But once you have a better place to go, then no problem. You give it up, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. That thank you for that clarification as well.
Yeah, for me, the other thing is, okay, I have had a spaced out day today. I don't know if you can tell, I'm a little spaced out, but so now I'm coming around, and I finally realized the main point of this question is that it's not that you just renounce everything, but you renounce the mentality that everything in this world is mine and it's meant for me. Because as you know, you came in naked, and as you know, no baggage is allowed on your flight out of here, right?
Right.
I'm writing a book, and we have a picture like that. It's called like Next Life Airlines, and the sign says no baggage allowed. And you see people like with big bags, and they can't take them on the flight, and they're walking in like they look like, you know, ethereal beings walking onto the flight. So the spiritual philosophy is not that you renounce things necessarily, because not everything is bad, but it's the mentality with which you use it that's bad. So you renounce the mentality. I'm not the physical body. This body doesn't even belong to me. I didn't create the elements in this body. This planet doesn't belong to me. I can buy land, but ultimately it doesn't belong to me. It was here long before I came. It's going to be here long after I go. So on the spiritual path, we try to use everything in service to God, service to others. Service to God will become service to others. And so we don't think this is mine. It's not my body. What do you use your body for? I use it in service. Why? Because it's not mine. It was given to me to be used in service. What about your house? It's not mine. Well, don't you own it? Yeah, my name's on it, but it's not how I think. It doesn't belong. It's meant I use my house in service. We have Kirtan in my house. We do so many things in my house. I don't see it as mine. I see it as like a temple. And you just go down and down and down. So when we talk about renunciation, we're talking about the renunciation of the wrong mentality. Not necessarily renouncing things. If you're good at something, you can use that in service. Why would you renounce it? But just renounce, like I like to do music. So what do I have to renounce? I have to renounce the ego, because musicians tend to have big egos. They like people to like them and applaud for them and so forth. So my service with music is to get people to chant together and dance and uplift their consciousness. My service is not to get people to like me. It's not my music is not to pump up my ego, but it's to help people advance spiritually. So then I'm using it perfectly. But if I just want to be a famous musician, then I'm misusing the talent that God has given me, which I should use for service. So it's really, renunciation is really a mentality. You know what I mean? It's interesting. Isn't it an interesting idea to say nothing belongs to me, not even my body? It's like, I can do whatever I want, but not really. Can you jump to the moon? No, you can't do that. And should you do whatever you want? No, because there's things you shouldn't do. Your body was given to you. It was given to you for service. And if you use it for service, you'll be so happy because then it's being used for its ultimate purpose. And then it's not about you anymore, not about your ego and what you like or don't like.
Right.
I think that's why I was saying, I'm like kind of above the clouds, because I'm always thinking about service. I'm not thinking about what I like or don't like. But that's where you run into trouble. I like this, I don't like that. Then you're up and down in the world of duality.
Yeah. And when you're thinking about service, just to add to that, there's an understanding that comes with that it's not in your hands anyway. You're doing it to please the divine or God or Krishna. And therefore it's in his hands. And so there's no need for attachment or aversion. Whatever happens when you're acting from that mentality was the right thing to happen.
Yeah.
There's no need to be attached.
You're offering it to him. And whatever happens.
There's lots
of
nice verses of that echo that.
Do your best. We have 2 verses left. Should we read them?
Yeah, let's do it.
2, what verse is this? 2 verses. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They are actually Brahman. Brahman means spiritual, or the spiritual plane, because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. Just what we talked about, activities which are not motivated by personal gain, but motivated by service and by seeing everything in this world in relation to God, to be used in service. So again, service comes up. And then this idea of liberation from old age and death. There is a better place out there, beyond birth and death. And then the last verse, it's about meditation. Those in full consciousness of me, who know me as the supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material manifestation of the demigods and of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. So we were talking about knowing the Supreme. So this is interesting. I mean, you know what can imagine what death is like. So Krishna is saying, if you take to this spiritual path of bhakti, then even when you're on the verge of death, you will have this deep connection, divine connection, and you will be stable. Which I kind of think, I often think like, what really could be a greater gift than to come to a point where even at the time of death, you are not disturbed, your consciousness is stable, you're able to maintain a very high level of spiritual consciousness, you're happy within. I mean, what more could you ask? And when a loved one dies, similarly, you maintain that consciousness. I often think about this, that when you understand Gita, this is one of the gifts you get from the Gita. And it's like one of the greatest gifts you could get. You can deal with anything, basically. I mean, if you can deal with death, you can deal with anything.
Right.
That's the most upsetting and difficult. So that's just me personally. I always think what greater gift there could be, because so many loved ones are going to die, and they're all going to die, but we're going to see many of them die, and we're going to suffer tremendously. What a gift to be able to be free from that suffering.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is for sure. It's interesting because we go through life and we don't think about death. But if you think about life in the context of eternity, our lifespan here is we come and go, and that's it. And what's the point of it all? And the greatest test of our life, of the way we chose to live our life and the way that we'll then move forward after death, is that moment of death. That's the test. No one thinks
launching
about that.
pad. It's the launching pad.
For that. Sorry, yeah, it's the launching pad for the
think
next
of death
place.
as a launching pad, and whatever you've done in this life will launch you up, down, or just the same.
We live as if we'll never die.
I think that's such an important point, because in our culture, we need good reasons to practice spiritual life, because it can seem like you're losing time. You put time into spiritual practice, like, what are you getting from it? Where's the money? I'm not going to get a promotion in my job because I chant in the morning or I study Bhagavad-Gita.
Right.
Although indirectly you might, because you'll be better. But that's not the point. The point is, death is a launching pad. So whatever consciousness you achieve here, that's where you're going in the next life. And, we're all trained not to think of the next life. We're trained to everything is this life. I just heard something amazing, and I have to confirm this. But someone told me that Tony Robbins, he came out and he said, for so many years, he's teaching people how to live better and achieve what they want. He said, but for so many years, I was thinking about death and what happens beyond, and I'm not preparing anybody for that. And I thought, wow, it's about time, because to me, that's like, duh, you've got everybody successful here, and then they die and they're not going up. You got them to go up materially, but it had nothing to do with spiritually.
Right.
And so that if you go up materially and you lose your spiritual life, that's the ultimate loss. And so that's kind of typical of our culture today. They don't believe in the next life. They don't put emphasis on that. And that, according to traditional Indian philosophy, that's kind of like the epitome of ignorance, that you just look at life in terms of this life only. There's no preparation for raising consciousness, for launching into something better, or perfect liberation after you die. People don't think that way. They're just like, oh, I'm upward mobility. I'm getting a better position. Yahoo! Everything's great. And we, from the spiritual platform, think, okay, between the two dots, okay, here's your life. That's great, but what about after the dot, the dash? Your life's a little dash in a sentence. What about after the dash? Then what?
Right.
That's what you have to live with forever. What you achieve here it's just a flash. But
Yeah,
you're going to create all this karma, and you're going to take that with you a lot longer.
Exactly. This is starting to this point forces you to think about other realities such as karma. That's exactly what I was thinking about, which is that whatever we do, we get a whatever action we take, there is a reaction. And that is true for, like you said, after the dash, it doesn't just stop, full stop, period, nothing. After you die, there's more. Yeah. And that law of karma is continuing. We don't think about that.
Yeah. And, and even if you don't believe it, I would just say, but what if?
Right.
at least, you're a human being. You should at least go, well, maybe, maybe I should investigate this, think about it, read books about it, talk about it, study from people who know it. Because if it does exist and I ignore it, that's like a huge loss.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what my spiritual master always talked about. Like you're eternal, and this one life is not such a big thing to put all your eggs in one basket about. Your egg should be in a different basket. And
at least hedge your bets, guys. Put some of your eggs in this basket, sure, but there's another basket. Maybe you could put some in there too. See where that takes you.
And, well, it's also ironic because everyone plans for the future. Where do you want to be in 10 years? I got my whole plan, my goals, my vision statements. And, I do my guided meditations, visualizing in 10 years, I'll be, here in this eco village, and we'll be doing this and that. All right, great. So where do you want to be in 100 years? Nobody asked that question.
Right.
Just ask anybody, any friend, any relative, and just say, where do you want to be in 100 years? It totally throws them off. Right? But you ask a spiritually minded person, it doesn't throw them off at all. They're like, oh, I want to be either in the spiritual world or in my next life doing this spiritual practice in this place. That'd be very clear.
Right. Absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's it.
Thank you so much.
Questions? I don't think there are any questions, right?
Yeah, I think that's us for today. But we managed to get through all of chapter 7. I'm very, very just again express my personal gratitude to you for taking so much of your time to come and work through this chapter with us. It's been wonderful. There are 3 previous episodes. If you've tuned in for this one, there are 3 previous episodes where we started and we worked through all of chapter 7. And just to say thank you, Mahatma. What we're doing with the podcast is we have different guest speakers coming in to cover chapters with us. But so from the next episode, we'll be starting chapter 8. I believe we're going to have a guest who some of you may know. It's a lady, a wonderful, wonderful person. Her name is Achyuta Gopi. So she'll be coming in to discuss chapter 8 with me and share her light, her understanding on that.
Nice.
And we'll see. There's a good chance that we'll come back to you, Mahatma, for future chapters. So just to put that out there, to warn you that you may hear from me again. But just want to say thank you so much, and it's been wonderful. I don't know if you have any closing words before we wrap up the episode today. Any advice for our listeners, chapter 7 or whatever it may be?
I think the ending discussion was actually the closing words. I could just put some icing on it. Whether you accept the Gita fully or not, at least while you're studying it, accept it as true so you can test it. Because you can't test something if you don't at least try it. So
nice.
My spiritual master said, at least accept it as true in theory so that you can test it.
Absolutely.
But again, I would just say the spiritually minded person is fixed on a lot more than this life. And, this life in our eternal sojourn in this world is a flash only. It's not significant. And when you see life in light of eternity and the soul in light of eternity, your perspective on life is much different, and all the stress and so forth. You just realize in the light of eternity, what I'm going through now is just like, it's like a flash. This problem is insignificant. And the real problem is that I'm still in this world. I've taken on a physical body. I've taken birth here because of my desire to somehow or other be separated from the divine. That's the real problem. And, what's interesting, we didn't talk about this, but if you look at history and you look at the great philosophers, what we talked about was quite normal. Like, for students and philosophers, Roman Empire, Greek Empire, those days, there's just like, this is what was taught, this kind of thing, this was just normal. But post-industrial revolution, you start losing it. And in the last 20, 30 years, dumbing down our educational system. These kinds of discussions, you don't find them, they're not common anymore. And these are the important things to be thinking about and discussing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again.
Hare Krishna. You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us, for listening. If you've been watching this all the way through, appreciate you. Hope that you're taking something away from this. That's our goal. Our service is to share what we've received, because we see value in it, and we believe it can help others. So hopefully it's helping you too. And we'll see you in the